for us then, Terry?
Whenever you're ready.
All right, well, welcome to the July 25th, 2024 meeting of the Town of Berthoud Planning Commission. I call this meeting to order at approximately 6 p.m. It's the tradition of the Planning Commission to start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Rieger, at this time, will you please take the roll?
Chairperson Anderson. Here. Vice Chairperson Smith. Here. Secretary Senegalis.
Here.
Commissioner Donnelly.
Here.
Commissioner Hoffmans.
Here.
Commissioner Pond.
Here.
Ms. Rieger, is there anyone on Zoom joining us tonight?
There is not.
Well, good evening. I don't know if I need to go through all this, but so I'll just go through a little bit, a summary of it. I'm Karen Anderson, the current chair of the Planning Commission. I'd like to thank all of our audience for being with us tonight. Copies of tonight's agendas are on the table here in front. Go through all of that. At this time, I would ask the commissioners present if they have any questions or comments on the minutes provided in the packet for the meeting of June 27th, 2024. Comments, questions? If not, then I would entertain a motion for approving the minutes.
I second. Oh, I'm sorry. I move to approve the minutes.
Nick Semadalis moves to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And Abby Smith seconds. With all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Okay, with that, thanks commissioners for doing that quickly. Now I would entertain a motion to adjourn the July 25th meeting of the Plan Commission.
I move to adjourn. I second.
With that, I would, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay, abstentions. Okay, so now we're adjourned. Okay, now let's open the Plan Commission study session. I call this the Planning Commission study session to order at approximately 6:02 p.m. All right, so at this time, Ms. Rieger, will you record the roll call for the study session for July 25th as the same as the roll call for the Plan Commission meeting that we
Yes,
just held? Thank you. All right. Anyone else join us on Zoom? No, we're good? All right.
Still good.
Okay, well, let's begin with the first item on the study session agenda. Our esteemed town attorney, Aaron Smith, is with us to begin the study session by discussing the use of motions and their purpose. Very helpful discussion for all of us. Thank you for agreeing to do this with us, Aaron, and for being with us in person.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission for having me here tonight, and Terry, Todd, and Ann. It's the opportunity to talk about motions, I think, was really spurred in part by a recent hearing in which the planning commissioners were considering a motion to deny, but with conditions. And that is the launching point for this talk, but we can certainly go beyond that issue. The reason that I will say to the board that's not appropriate to move to deny with conditions is because you have your authority is set out in the laws of the town, in the town ordinances, and there isn't any situation that I'm aware of in the code that allows that kind of action. So the code itself speaks to how you render a decision on all of the types of hearings, matters that you have jurisdiction over. And typically you're charged and you're given authority to do three things, right? To approve with conditions, or deny. So that sets the limits on the authority for how you make your motions. That does not, I think that does not rule out a straight denial with a request that staff deliver some particular comments that you make on the record that you have consensus on, right? So whatever those amount to, they're not conditions on your denial, they're simply, your comments made on the record, and helpful to the extent that you are appointed to this board and have certain specific authority under state statute and the town code as an advisory body on land use matters. So, it's up to the trustees to take into account, to the extent they want to, those comments. But I think you can certainly feel free to, in situations where you think it's appropriate to make those kind of comments. Again, I'm going to stop right there and see if you have any questions on just that discrete issue.
So when you say that we could deny but request the staff deliver comments to the town board, what are there any restrictions or limitations on what those comments can be?
Yes, and that's the perfect next segue. So I would say yes, right? Because we're always looking at the fairness of the process, and we're always looking at making sure that your statements are within the proper parameters, and those are statements that pertain to the criteria on which the application is judged. In your roles as a judge, sitting as a judge, you are applying those criteria to the facts that are presented by staff, the applicant, and the public. So yes, you should weigh, in silence what comments you want to make based on, are they germane, relevant, do they go to the criteria?
So something like saying that we would suggest that the applicant have a meeting with the community surrounding the land use application. Would that be something, we can make a suggestion like that, but we couldn't say you need to do that before it goes to the board or something? We have to be careful how we would say that.
Right, well, in the context of a denial, right? I think you could say that it certainly seems, after all we've heard tonight, that one comment that we could make as a board, and you take a poll, is everybody on board with that? Then I certainly think that would be a great example and a perfectly appropriate one.
So we have fairly broad parameters in, as long as we can say that that pertains to what that criteria is.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. So planning commission, they can deny and say to the applicant and to the town trustees, we're denying because of these reasons in the criteria for approval, to approve. However, we also want the applicant strongly advise them to do X, Y, and Z, or give direction to the town trustees that this is why we're denying. I guess how could that motion have been made for denial on that, let's say, case X? What was a way that that the planning commission could have denied that one and given direction to the applicant?
Yeah, I think it's, and maybe this is, if I understand your question, I think it's two separate things.
Okay.
You don't couple them. You don't join it. You make your motion, you have your second, you discuss it, you vote on it. Right? Again, it's gonna be a motion to deny, because that's what we're talking about. And then it's settled, the record is clear, you've made that motion. And then I think you could, take up a conversation if the situation is compelling enough, because and was that
So to kind of be clear,
mhm.
we would go ahead, we would deny, our motion would be to deny.
Recommend to
and then-
deny, yeah.
Yeah, recommend to deny based upon certain criteria, right? So we're saying we're denying, and this is the reason why. As it relates to suggestions, that's separate and aside from the whole denial process, basically, and that could be a separate conversation after the motion, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
And probably those things were being discussed during the deliberation,
okay.
so they're not completely new, right? I mean, I wouldn't suggest that you, after, in the situation where you deny, that you spend a lot of time to have step two. I think step two is organically going to have presented itself during your deliberations. Yeah, right? Because I don't know that in most situations where you deny, you're even gonna worry about making those comments or adding those suggestions.
Is it best not to provide suggestions?
I think that, again, if they're made, if you as a board are just seeing something during those deliberations that just keeps bubbling up, I think you can feel comfortable in being able to say, we're done, we're denied, but Madam Chair, this issue came up so often, and it seems to be one that can be articulated, right? As opposed to, I'm really struggling, spending another half hour to struggle to come up with something when it didn't sort of arise during the conversation itself would be, I think, a waste of everybody's time, just not efficient. But I think if during the course of your deliberations, there's just this feeling that, man, these folks should have talked to their neighbors, and it just is compelling to everybody, then that sort of organically presented itself, sort of naturally presented itself. I just don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this. In other words, I don't want you to feel like doing something like that would be a mistake. And feel like, gosh, that just really seemed like that was so prevalent in the struggle that we had to come to our determination that it'd be worth noting. Those things that seem worth noting. And maybe it's, as Anne pointed out, maybe it's something that develops as a suggestion to the applicant, or maybe it's noteworthy to the Board of Trustees. Whatever that is. If it seems like it's worth noting, and I think you'll know, right? Then I think you can feel the license to articulate that.
Okay.
You know,
Does
I
that
think
make
that's
sense?
something that, as stuff is happening and I'm listening to the commissioners, in my head is going this, okay, procedurally, how do we get to where I think everybody's going? And so this is helpful because it gives us gives me the procedural tools too, you know, gives all of us the procedural tools to know that, but that's what's going through my head the whole, you know, a lot of the time.
Exactly. Kind of a discrete decision-making process, a discrete is criteria A met? It's not met because of X, Y, and Z. Can we all come to consensus? No, I think it's not met because of X. Okay, well, it's at least not met because of X. It's not met, right, because of X. And then, you know, next criteria number 2. It's not met, again, because of X, Y, and Z. And the X, Y, and Z is the evidence. You know, I heard this evidence and it's compelling to me.
I think we've got it down that we know we have to follow criteria. We know we've got to go through each thing,
Yes,
you know,
thank
and
you.
some of those land use issues. And I think it's kind of, we all have that down now, I think. As much as sometimes we don't want to do it that way, we know that that's the right way to do it from a procedural due process
Yeah,
standpoint.
and I appreciate that so much.
Yep, and what you do is, and if the audience misinterprets this, that's one thing, but what you all do so well is, all right, we have criteria for approval in the code. We don't have criteria for denial in the code. We have approval because in order to meet the criteria, in order to get an approval, you have to meet the criteria, and if you don't, you get denied. And so what the audience may hear is, oh, you're looking for criteria for approval. And in the staff report in your packets and on the slide, it always states, this is the criteria for approval. And I think that a comment was made that, well, you're just looking for ways to approve it, but that's a misunderstanding of the process. And so what you all do in your deliberation is so good that you're setting it up really nice and tight where you are discussing the criteria. Now hopefully 95% of the cases that come before you are going to be very clear. But when there are these incidents where it's not clear, it's even more important to set it up. And when it is clear, it's nice to just practice.
Couldn't say that is so true.
I've been trying to put even in my scripts to myself on these land use issues to explain that we have a certain set of criteria under the code that we have to follow, blah blah blah, so that the audience understands that we're just not saying, oh, we just don't like this, you know? So we're just not going to do. You know, I wanted them to understand that we're not. We have to look at this in a different way, you know, and that we have to follow certain criteria.
Yeah, I think you do an excellent job of that.
Erin, when would it be a good time? Let's say that the planning commission, we're in a hearing, and for some reason new evidence is brought to the planning commission that maybe it's a gravel pit and they have changed their augmentation plan, or just something substantive to the case, and they're just bringing it forward. Staff hasn't reviewed it. Referral agencies haven't reviewed it. I'm sorry, that's my phone. Can a planning commission say, hey, applicant, you know, we're getting the gist that nobody has reviewed this. It hasn't gone through the appropriate referral. We're going to recommend, and staff please concur, we're going to recommend that this hearing be continued. So can planning commission recommend a continuance, and can staff, if staff sees that things are going really wild, can staff, when is the appropriate time to say this should be continued because this isn't a good situation?
Well, I think if staff gets a sense that substantive information has come out that you haven't reviewed, you will be making that recommendation. I mean, when that recommendation comes from staff, I think it's a compelling recommendation.
So what you're saying is it's okay for staff to tell us, hey, we haven't looked at this yet.
Yes, absolutely. And you guys have the Okay, you won't be wallflowers about that, I
No,
know.
no, no.
So you'll be very good about that. I think when it's not originating from staff, but it's everything was here. I mean, it's not necessarily anything new, but it just seems like there are some issues with like the level of completeness in, say, a commissioner's mind. I think that's the opportunity for really drilling down with the applicant, as opposed to thinking about the continuance, right? I think the continuance should be the exception. Because I think that in the example that Anne gave, staff's gonna be making that recommendation for a continuation of the hearing. I think that's gonna be handled. I think what I've seen over the years is where there seems to be sometimes maybe it's because a commissioner has a particular interest. They might also be an engineer, they might also be, somebody who knows about how water flows through pipes, or, have some utilities background, and they just aren't convinced that they've got enough information. I think that's a time to really put the applicant on the spot and drill down. And sometimes the commissioners themselves aren't the ones with that extra information. It might be a public person, someone from the public who has some really unique experience, and they raise an issue for the commission that maybe just wouldn't have been thought of by even the engineering staff that the town has, or by the planning staff. And again, they might bring up an issue, and I think again, drill the applicant on that. Make the applicant give you the confidence. And I think rather than a continuation in that situation, what you always can think about is, well, and again, if staff isn't saying, wow, hearing that from someone in the audience compels them to think that this needs to be looked at more carefully with all of the town's experts and the experts in their areas. If they're not jumping up and down waving the flag, staff is not jumping up and down waving the flag, again, I think, drill the applicant on the issue, and if in the end it seems like there's a gap, then I think you can, craft a condition that and you did that, I think, beautifully within the last several months, where you put the onus on the applicant to have a additional memo added from the traffic engineer that addressed a discrete issue that might have been brought up that night.
So I have a question. So say we're going through this and staff identifies that there's something that hasn't been reviewed, or something really happened that's material. When is it appropriate to deny as opposed to continue?
Well, I think that situation that you just identified would not be a situation necessarily to deny. But then again, it might be. I mean, if that in the minds of a majority of the commissioners goes to a failure on the part of the applicant to meet his burden to show that the criteria was met, then, then there you are. That material material gap, or that material bit of evidence is key to the applicant having not met its burden. And, you know, there you are.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if it's new information, right, that has not been reviewed. I mean, I get the whole continuance thing, right, give the planning department an opportunity to review, but the other side of it is, you came with different information that no one reviewed. So, is it really a
Well,
rejection or a denial, or is it really given, I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand really kind of where
yeah, these things are,
you draw the line.
these things are difficult to talk about in hypotheticals.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it seems to me that in a situation where something material and new comes to light, that on the part of the applicant, that you can almost, and I think you can appropriately say, we don't think that what you're telling us on that point is, credible is not quite the right word, but carries any weight, because you've just come up with it tonight. It hasn't been reviewed, studied, analyzed by staff, so we're just gonna put it and bracket it and put it over here, and we're going to, you know, make our decision on what was presented here tonight. Again, unless staff is saying, gosh, we would recommend that this new information be reviewed by us, and so we're gonna recommend
Okay.
continuation. And I think that's perfectly fair. I mean, the reason I think you err on the side of not continuing, you err on the side of making a decision, is that just like the criteria are what guide the process, because they're written down, so is the basic procedure, right? But there's gonna be a hearing, there's gonna be a resolution of that hearing at planning commission. It's gonna move on to council or to trustees with notice. And in other words, what I'm trying to say is there's a procedure set out. And if that procedure gets bogged down with a continuance, that may not be that big of a deal, but it might be. You know, we know that time is money, right? So we know that the applicant has a reasonable expectation that you're gonna listen to that, what's presented, and you're gonna make a decision that night. If it gets to be, I mean, I think the reason that you would maybe not make a decision that night is because it's so late. I
Okay.
mean, if you get into the 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock timeframe,
Continuance.
I don't think people can make a good decision at 11 o'clock at night after you've worked all day. I think it's very, very difficult. So to me, that there, you know, because there's just been so many people who wanted to comment, it's just been a long presentation, it's been several long presentations, and now it's really late. I mean, to me, that's a legitimate reason, right? You're just you can't even formulate words because you're just so tired. You know, that I think, but even then, if you're close and you can get to a decision, it's better for everybody. Better for the staff, because every time they put a planning commission meeting together, it's a production for them.
Yes.
So it's just better for things to move the way the procedure and the code says they're supposed to move.
Yeah. And I kind of understand, like, if you deny, that really just resets the whole process. And for the most part, we don't want to do that unless there's something that is just so fraudulent or materially, you know, inadequate.
Is denial treated differently than a continuance? So if we deny an item, does does it go to the town board after we deny it, or the trustees, or does it go
Oh, it
back?
still does, you
It
vote
still
for
does,
denial?
Yeah.
we deny it.
Yeah,
Still
you're,
goes to-
you're, just- you're,
Is that
you're an advisory
recommendation?
board, so you're just making recommendations.
So if we deny it, it still goes,
Oh, yes. Yeah, the process
and if
continues.
we continue it, it just stays here.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in my mind, I was kinda thinking if there's new information that we didn't feel it was properly vetted, would we just deny it? And that gives the applicant the ability to get it vetted before they get to the town board? I mean, that sends the town board I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, if you have reasons, I mean, if you can articulate that whatever was presented causes you to find that a criteria, that the applicant hasn't met its burden on a criteria, then, you're gonna have that discussion. And you can say, these are the reasons why they didn't meet that burden. And yeah, I mean, the code says you have the discretion to deny.
And that's based upon our interpretation of what they've presented for evidence.
And then I was going to say, Commissioner Donnelly, that's a perfect example, potentially then, we're denying based on this criteria, and then that discussion afterwards, they should know, have a neighborhood meeting, clarify the traffic study, and then the applicant can make a decision, because on everything but final plats, we take it to the trustees for approval, and we're not, or for review, and at that moment in time, that staff represents planning commission at the board of trustees meeting. We're not representing staff's review anymore, we're representing your review with, staff report and everything. And at that point in time, Erin, then is that a good example where they could say, really before the trustees hearing, we would strongly advise you do X, Y, and Z. They then get with staff, maybe staff continues the hearing where we just go and say, we're continuing it at the applicant's request. We'd like to have it happen in 2 months from now. And then the applicant can address all of the concerns that you all raised, get it properly vetted through the referral agencies, and then go back to the trustees and say, we heard planning commission, this is what they said, this is what we did, and now we've resolved this issue.
Right, and we know that happens.
Yeah.
We know in our experience, it has worked just like that.
Yeah, for example, on West Side Crossing, that applicant had a lot of conditions of approval. Because they were anxious to get to you all. And you were really good about noticing, hey, there's a lot of conditions of approval. And you were asking staff why. And then there were also 2 or 3 items that kind of rose to the surface during the hearing. You all said on the final plat, before you can record this final plat, here's some other things that are conditions of approval. And you can add those, and then let's say that was that preliminary plat, you could have said, before you go to the town trustees, we want you to address these items, even if you're recommending approval. Correct.
Interesting.
And I will tell you, if we have something squirrely that comes up during the meeting where they're presenting new evidence that hasn't been properly vetted, Tana and I will be raising our hands and saying, Chair Anderson and members of the Planning Commission, staff has concern and this is why. We're a team.
Well, good, because I'm glad that you have the ability to be able to raise that red flag,
Right.
during a deliberation. I think we've had a lot of good learning experiences with some of these cases over the last few months. I think this is really helps to answer some of the questions.
Yeah, it's great to be able to debrief
Yeah.
on the specific cases.
Yeah.
That's a great opportunity.
And just even know what our tools are, what are the things we can do.
Yeah.
And stay within those boundaries that due process defines for us, and fairness defines, that defines for us. So yeah, it's helpful. Questions of Erin? Anything else we should know?
Anything come to mind?
No, you all do a very good job of deliberation and setting the tone for the meeting and sticking to that criteria. It makes our lives really easy when we've got an amazing planning commission. So you all really do a very good job. Thank you.
We think you do a very good job, and I appreciate the fact that you allow us this kind of learning.
Right.
Because I think it all helps us be better at what we're trying to accomplish.
And I think the way the packages are put together, showing the criteria, showing your, review and comments helps us as well. I think that's huge. Yeah, that is huge.
Vital to have that professional
Yep.
analysis.
It's very helpful, and I like how it's all listed right there for us. It's not like we're going through pages, and it's usually on
Yeah.
1 or 2 pages. It's just right there.
Yep, the code.
Yeah. I like that. Sounds great. All right.
Thanks
Well,
for staying
thank
late to
you.
talk to
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely, it's a pleasure. Do you
I
want us to
appreciate
hang
having
out
you
for
in
the
person.
comp plan chat? It might be just a half hour.
Yeah, I was gonna try to leave by about 7, but
Okay.
sure, I'd be happy to.
All right.
I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
You guys wanna be able to.
All right, so that means that Anne's gonna talk, excuse me.
Sorry, no pressure, yeah.
Director Johnson
Thank
is
you. You
gonna
have our
talk
full
really
attention.
fast.
Thank you, Erin, that's a good one.
Thanks again, Erin.
Yes, thank you. Erin.
Thank you. And Terry, can you remind me what I need to press to get it up there?
Magic Terry is coming.
I need to do it to learn. Oh, just there?
There you go. Yeah, you can just use the arrows. Oh, I don't know why it's not showing up there yet.
Okay.
There might be a little delay.
I have to tell you, I learned some interesting things about Terry the other day at the Berthoud Market, so. She's a crafter. So.
Oh, boy.
So we're just gonna talk about the comprehensive plan. Thank you, Terry. And a high level overview. So one of the things about the comp plan is it's not regulatory. It's a vision document that marks one moment in time for the town of Berthoud. It's not legally binding, and it's really just visionary. So
Can I ask a question about that? Whenever we do the zoning motions, all of the criteria is based on does it match the comp plan? And I guess even on the subdivision that we approved, then the town board denied, they based it on it not meeting the criteria of the comp plan. So when you say it's not a legally binding document, like I thought that was like really, in the end, like the document that we had to live by.
Maybe there's a distinction there between the comp plan and the town
Town
code
code,
and
yeah.
the relationship between them.
yeah, so we have the zoning maps, and on that particular case, it was very interesting, and I really don't have anything to tell you about why. Do you wanna? Well, it was on Revere and the.
Yeah, the specific example.
2 little lines of color
Yeah,
across.
I mean, I think, there's a lot of discretion left in those criteria. Gives this board and the board of trustees discretion. I don't have the code requirement in front of me. And you've zeroed in, Commissioner, on something that I think is a great question. Typically, if you look at many land use codes from town to town, city to city, and county to county, the rezoning criteria is going to be something like this rezoning application is, and typically the language will be consistent with. So consistent with is a little bit different than in compliance with, or,
Meets the intent.
yeah, because that is why, that is after all why the state legislature, you know, in its wisdom many, many years ago, said that every town and every municipality will create a comp plan so that it could guide your zoning. And we have some really important case law in Colorado where the court has said it's absolutely just that, a guide to your zoning, unless you adopt it as an ordinance. And the town of Berthoud has never adopted its comp plan as an ordinance, but the code folds in these concepts about consistency. And you're never gonna be able to have, I mean, that was a most unusual situation because as you know, comp plan goals are written as objectives and strategies, and they're pretty loose and pretty you know, subjective. Or subjective. Broad. They're broad. And the picture, the actual graphic of the comp plan created the issue because it was this sense of where the commercial versus residential division was in a particular parcel. And I think the Board of Trustees found that compelling. I don't think they had to. There wasn't anything in the law that said they had to do that, but there's enough discretion in the zoning criteria that they could have done that. So it wasn't, I don't think it would have been a wrong decision either way, right? Because as Ann points out, comp plan, and as Ton was presented that night, comp plan is just a visionary document. So that was a really long answer to a really good question.
I mean, I guess we would have the same discussion. I mean, the
Yes.
criteria is,
Yep.
is this zoning consistent with the goals of the town's comprehensive master?
Sorry, can I say one thing?
Yes, please.
I think it's important to also point out that the comprehensive plan does have vision and goals actually stated within the document. And so if you were to reference rightfully, if you were to reference those goals or vision, you should be specific.
So we're gonna look at those. So again, this was again from 2021. It is 3 years ago, and the town started working on this in 2019, which is now 5 years ago. So these goals and vision, again, are a snapshot of one period of time, and they're to guide growth and development. And then it's just the primary responsibility is to implement that, but it's again not a regulatory document at all. The future land use map is not a regulatory document. It is to guide. And you can interpret it very strict. If there's this parcel with split lines and different colors on either side of the line, you can be very, very strict about that, or you can choose to use that as a guide. And really comp plan, that a line is not zoning. A line, and that line, if it were zoning, the line can also change by an applicant's request. So
to that point, that particular parcel, obviously, we knew that it had some split. We didn't know if it was 20, 80, 75, 25, whatever. Can an applicant come in and just say, we would like that entire property zoned as commercial or residential? Can they do like one or the other? They can do either.
yep, they can either
So
or.
they don't have to meet some certain criteria for commercial.
They can choose, they could also choose to say, we wanna rezone this and we also want you to change your future land use framework map so that we can rezone. But again, that framework map or the future land use map, it's intended to be visionary and not regulatory. And that particular, there are a lot of things about that particular case that were very interesting. And you all used the comprehensive plan as a visionary and guiding document. I think that's all I really want to say. Okay, so the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, it's called DOLA. They have these lists of potential uses for a comp plan. One, it's a basis for regulatory action. So let's say in your comprehensive plan, for example, one of the goals, an action item in the comp plan was to amend the plan to protect important bodies of water. And so one of the ways that we can protect that is have a buffer so that if you are developing property on a lake, you can't develop right up to the edge of that lake, but instead maybe you have a 200-foot buffer from the lake to protect the shoreline, to protect people from being right there, to obstruct others from getting to the lake. Maybe we would say you have to put a trail around the lake so that the public can get in and enjoy that amenity or that natural resource. So what we would do, that's a goal. We want to protect shorelines so that the public can have access to the shorelines. So then what the town code does then is the town code and the design standards would state developers cannot develop within X number of feet of a shoreline, and within that area there shall be a 10-foot wide concrete trail. So that's a way of taking a vision from the comp plan and implementing it into the development code so that there are very tight standards of how we are going to implement that vision. It's a basis for community programs and decision making, another source for planning studies. So let's say that an item in the comprehensive plan was, and it is, strengthen downtown's identity and by doing placemaking. Okay, so that there's not enough to go on there to know how the town needs to do that. So we would go out and retain another consultant to help us strengthen our brand identity and placemaking for downtown, or staff then would do something, would develop that plan. It's standard for review at the county and the state. You can use it to review land use applications. They're also used for regional planning. The North Front Range Metropolitan Organization, it's a transportation organization. They will take our comprehensive plans and look at where our trails are, where our open space is, what our road classification is, and it's almost like a puzzle piece where they match then the counties up, and then they look at what Loveland's doing and what Mead's doing, what Longmont's doing, and they piece it all together to see are the interstate systems adequate? Where are these communities growing? Do we need to be planning for changes to the interchange? So it has regional impact as well. Source of information, we're always looking in the comprehensive plan in that demographic section to look at how do they think our community is going to grow and how fast, and are we tracking with that? And for example, Ken Matthews, he is the director of water, wastewater, and stormwater, so all the wet utilities in town. And he is using that forecast for growth to project, when does he need to make changes and look at improving his infrastructure and upsizing infrastructure, and where in town is infrastructure almost at capacity and looking at where we're going to be growing based on that future land use map. So it's used for budgeting, it's used for just making plans for the town's growth, and then again, that long-term guide. Okay, so on the next one then, I can't read what's on my slide, so I have to zoom in here. So in the plan, you have the authority. So again, Colorado Revised Statute says that planning commissions, you are the owner, you are the director of these comp plans. That authority resides with you. Now, of course, we want to get the buy-in and engagement from constituents as well as our elected officials. And then again, the purpose of our comprehensive plan is to establish preferences and priorities based on the vision and what we hear from others in the community. And I love this statement here. The Berthoud Comp Plan is a statement of how the community views itself, what the town envisions for the community's future, and actions the town is going to take in order to implement those visions. Then there are some objectives, and then here the comprehensive plan, there are these 7 objectives. So the comp plan has these goals that need to be met when they're updating the comp plan. So then the next item then through, there was a community vision, goals were made and strategies were made. Here was the vision statement. You want small town feel, strong sense of community, valuing its surrounding rural and pastoral character, recognizing the town's proximity to regional economic centers, amenities, and outdoor rec that creates diverse economic opportunities. It has an authentic, vibrant downtown. It has attractive neighborhoods and thriving businesses, abundant parks, open spaces connected by trails. Pretty generic. I might wager that every community in Colorado, and quite frankly the nation, probably has goals very similar to this. High level goals, but they're incredibly important. You know, having that small town feel and sense of community. Well, we like that Berthoud is small and it's growing. So how do you implement that when you know that Berthoud is growing and it's that continuous, the trails and that the streets connect and that you don't have this gigantic 5-story wall without any windows on a street, and that the development looks appealing and evokes that, again, a sense of place. So there are ways that we can do that, but this vision statement is not unique. It's very generic. Then we go over here. And so there are vision statements for Berthoud. It talks about how the visioning happened. Again, that vision statement. And then here are these main goals, these 7 main goals. Maintaining a strong community identity, environmental sustainability, growth management, economic resiliency, housing diversity, transportation enhancement, and infrastructure improvement. Now on growth management, what does that mean? And Berthoud is growing. So by looking at all of the other value statements that are in the comprehensive plan, and oftentimes those value statements are more important than a broad goal statement like this, because Berthoud is developing at a very compact form. And the reason why Berthoud is developing at a compact form is that the town determined that that's the direction through the urban zoning and suburban zoning that were a direct outcome of the comprehensive plan to preserve more of the land and not just spread out and have everybody be on acreages. So Berthoud really wanted that compact form of development because it's strengthening the heart of the downtown by getting more people close to the downtown. It's also very affordable to provide services when you have a compact form of development. It's easy to provide opportunities for people to hop on their bike and go on the trail, and less reliance on automobiles when it's a compact form of development. So again, growth management doesn't always mean compact development, but compact development is an outcome of the comprehensive plan. And I know Abigail, I think, Karen, were you on the?
Not when they were doing this.
Okay, Abigail, I think you're the only one.
That
was part of this.
Can I ask you a question?
Please, go ahead. Yeah, this is just very open.
What do you mean by environmental sustainability? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of that could be preserving our open spaces. It could be water protection. It could mean even environmental sustainability could reflect back on compact development, so we're not relying on our automobiles. Now the town has put out an RFP and has several candidates that they are considering to come up with a sustainability action plan for the town. So that could include, all electric vehicles and EV charging stations, things like that. But it could also mean, how do we provide service to our constituents? How do we process a building permit as efficiently as possible, or a land use permit, or a right-of-way permit? How do we provide our services in a sustainable manner? So it's that people, planet, profit trifecta of the goals of sustainability. So it's a great question, and I don't know if we 100% know what our sustainability plan and goals are going to be, but we're going to find out really soon. But some of them could be, preserving the wildlife, having that buffer around lakes and view sheds. We have a new landscape design guidelines that came out of a directive in the comprehensive plan that encourage individuals to have bioswales and green infrastructure versus the hard concrete and straight pans, to maybe have it be more natural.
Okay.
So on this figure here, and these are all in your electronic notebooks, they're on the planning page. There's a tab that Terry created, like Planning Commission e-notebooks. So these are all just snips from the comprehensive plan. I read this 3 times before I interviewed for my position, so I would hope that I remembered some of this. I don't remember it all, and I have it on my list in the next few weeks to reread the landscape guidelines and reread the comp plan and reread all of these things, because now I've been here for 18 months and something new is going to jump out at me, and it's just good to always reread. And again, I don't have this memorized. But again, here is, so these are in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that pent? It's not hex. What is
hex.
Hexagon? Okay, in the hexagon, thank you. In the hexagons.
What's that?
Which is what they always say that the witches use, is the
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Evil spells.
I'm less familiar with witches.
Witchy comp plan. So those are the vision statements. So it's a place that retains its small town feel and a strong sense of community. Again, these are all things that every community wants, but then there are some goals here and strategies. So the goal, growth management, maintaining a strong community identity. Again, but then here, employ a transit-based planning approach for local land use management and placemaking. Okay, so that's more of that urban, suburban, even conservation district planning that zoning, that where you're looking at use maybe before form, you're looking at some form for the identity. The next is recognizing the town's proximity to regional economic centers, outdoor recreation. So the key strategy there is develop and maintain a safe, efficient, and connected multimodal transportation network that accommodates all ages and abilities. So part of staff's reports to you are always going to be, we've evaluated the transportation network and they are going to be connecting to the trails on either side, or they are going to have stub outs so that when the property next to them develops, that trail can continue. And we have regional trails in our plans as well. How do we connect regionally to Loveland system, to the North Front Range system? How do we make sure our streets are all connected? How do we make sure even that there is connected open space? In the First Street overlay plan that was an outcome of the comprehensive plan, there is a green space that starts down on Mountain just east of First. And that green space is started in, I'm sorry, right now I'm blanking out on the name of that subdivision. But it starts there, and the plan is to continue that green belt all the way up to State Highway 287. So as those properties develop, it's our job in community development to make sure that we are remembering we've got this vision, we need to keep that green space going up. Tana and I actually have little Pokemon figures. There's one that's called Eevee on our desk because I was forgetting with commercial development, everybody has to have an EV charger. So there are little things that we're doing to make sure that we remember, okay, we've got EV, we know we have, all commercial has to have EV chargers. So, you know, we have to keep remembering to read our comprehensive plan and read the code and things like that, then get into the design guidelines that are in the code, that are in those standalone architectural guidelines, which Aaron Bagnall, who created those, we're going to have a sit-down meeting and make sure they're as tight as they can be. And the landscape guidelines that were just adopted earlier this year. So we're always reviewing those. When we have pre-application meetings, Ton and Terry are making sure that everybody knows, here are these guidelines. And when we're doing our review, a planner is reviewing kind of everything. We don't need to know the details because we know our engineer is going to know the details, or the school district is going to know their details. But we're looking at everything from that broad umbrella, but then we have to get into the details to make sure things haven't been lost or left behind. So that's it. Ton, can you pull on the spot here? Can you pull up that page of the comp plan? That is there another place where it lists goals, or was this?
No, this is what I was,
it.
yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about, again, a small town feel, diverse economic opportunities. The hexagon on the right there, it creates diverse economic opportunities. Okay, so the goals are economic resiliency and transportation enhancement. So some of those key strategies are create a sustainable balance of goods and services by concentrating businesses near major roadway intersections, neighborhoods and employment centers which maximize access to residents, workers, and visitors. So again, commercial development is key at the intersection of North Berthoud Parkway and Highway 287. Commercial development is key at the intersection of Mountain and Highway 287. Commercial enterprise is also going to be key at I-25 and Mountain. And hopefully there will be some commercial development at the top of First Street and 287, and then all along that core between First and Second to the railroad. And it be that our innovation district where we'd like to see more redevelopment of industrial and commercial properties. So again, we're focusing on those areas, but this doesn't give us it's not dictating how this is done, because that's some of that dictating will come from the code, but also some of that's going to come organically from developers. And we don't want our code to be so rigid that we can't embrace a really creative, outlier idea that we never could have envisioned. Okay, so attractive residential neighborhoods and thriving businesses, housing diversity, which you all are going to start working on in August, economic resiliency. So provide a mix of housing, goods, and services that meet the varying needs of businesses and the life stages of residents. So again, how do we do that? Walt, our economic development manager, goes to that thing in Las Vegas and tries to recruit businesses. We're always trying to work with new businesses that come to Berthoud. We're having 3 or 4 times a year meetings with the real estate community to let them know, do not bring us your tired, poor, hungry, willing to be free, the Statue of Liberty opening up to everybody. We want the polished, we want good industry coming to town, and so we're showing them how we want that to look so that if they have somebody who has a project that might not fit the vision for Berthoud, that the realtor is more successful to take them somewhere else where it is a good fit. And when they have the opportunity to reach out and talk with somebody who might be a good fit for Berthoud, then we talk to them and get them, recruitment happening. An authentic, vibrant downtown civic core. So you see the goals up here. And then so the key strategies are retain and enhance the vitality of downtown by supporting the historic character, adaptive reuse, and a viable public realm with healthy businesses and transportation connections. So Berthoud Drug, it's moved out west in this great new building. So what now we have a missing tooth downtown now.
What's going there?
Yeah.
We don't know yet. We don't know yet, but Walt has been in contact with some individuals that might have a buyer or a leaser or a tenant. We don't know yet, but he is working in the scene of trying to get somebody in there that will be appropriate. We don't want a warehouse with the windows blacked out. We want something that's going to have activation on the street, so it looks like things are going on. But he again, a lot of it is, it's public property. People have the right to do things with their property, but he gets actively engaged in trying to make things right for Berthoud. And then the town has a downtown facade improvement program. So if somebody needs a new sign for that new building or new paint, or let's say they want to take off a false facade on the building and tuck point and fix their historic facade, there's money available to do some of those things. And then the last one here is an abundant parks, open space, and connected by trails. And I think we've talked about that a lot. So these goals, we look at them, and I think Ton and I have talked about maybe pulling those out a little bit more in the staff report and during the presentation and saying, all right, here is our, what's 7? Septagon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've looked at our, what?
Yeah.
Heptagon. We have looked at our heptagon of septagon, whatever. We've, these 7 main goals, our witches page. We've looked at that. Here's how we believe this application is meeting the overarching goals of the comprehensive plan. Now, you know, I was a planner for Weld County a long time ago, and I used to take a lot of pleasure in trying to figure out how to deny applications that were just a bad idea. By digging through the comprehensive plan and finding, oh, I can find this thing, I can deny it, it's gonna be great. And yeah, you can find anything in the comprehensive plan to deny any application. You can also find anything in the comprehensive plan to approve any application. If there's just a really bad idea, of course we're going to be looking for those things, but really, by the time something comes to you, it's already been through this scrubbing. We're making sure all these goals and the criteria for approval can work with conditions of approval, development standards, things like that. I mean, we can dig and just come forth and just recommend denial for everything. But, you know, if there's a good product, why not recommend approval? But at one point in time, there were a couple cases that I really had a good time.
But she admits it.
And I admit it. Yeah, it was a long time ago.
It's all about interpretation.
Yes, it is. But that's really the end of this presentation. I just wanted to bring it back to you all and admit that I don't remember the whole thing. And over the next 2 weeks, I've just put it on my calendar tonight, some of these big picture items that I need to do to just refresh myself with all of these different codes and master plans. But that's it for me. Do you have any questions? Does this help?
Did you want to go through anything with the report card?
Oh yeah, so the report card, yes, and I don't have it up on here, but the report card, I think this was presented to you all about a year ago. The report card here, it lists every action item in the comprehensive plan, and then in one of the columns, it lists has it been completed or not, and then some notes. The town board of trustees with town administrator Kirk, they met within the last 6 weeks, and they came up with some goal setting too, that their strategic planning that they want to do over the next 18 months. And several of those goals can be tied directly back to the comprehensive plan. So it's really nice when staff gives the comprehensive plan report card to the town trustees in the next month or so. They'll be able to see some of your plans, they cross-reference. There's cross-referencing in these to the open space plan and the parks and the trails plans. And then what staff does is we utilize that action plan and report card in our budgeting as well. So we all have our bread and butter work that we have to do, processing land use cases, but there are other things that that we need to do too to implement the plan. Because the worst insult to a community to do is you get your comprehensive plan, you put it on the shelf and you forget about it until the statutory 5 or 10 years comes by and you have to update it. The best thing to do, especially this comprehensive plan, Abigail, your work, the rest of the planning commission's work, and staff at that time, it won an award. I think it was a 2022 award winner at the Colorado chapter of the American Planning Association, their annual meeting. This is a fabulous comprehensive plan, and you should feel really proud about it. And so the action plans, yes, action items. So they're there. I don't have my copy in front of me, but they're color coded to some degree. So I think there's some orange. That means it's the town trustees. There's some green. That means it's in the works. And I think the items in bold in that one column mean it's already been done. And several items talk about housing. And again, we did get a grant from DOLA. Ayers and Associates have been retained, and on the 22nd of August, Ryan Baker from the school district Jeff Fines from Loveland Housing Authority, and Tiffany Brody from Birth and Habitat for Humanity. They are going to be joining you all. You are the steering committee for this project. And they're going to be ex officio members for the project, and they're going to be coming, and heirs will be here to have a kickoff. There may be a land use case going that evening. We don't quite know yet. But if there is, maybe we'll do yours later or yours first and have them come later. But just get ready. And so because of this, it might be every third meeting that we will be working on housing. And so just plan on, there will be meetings coming up. They might be long meetings. They will definitely be at least an hour and a half. The first thing that they're going to do is they're looking at all of the housing studies that have been done in the region that might include Berthoud, and doing a good assessment on what is the regional concern for housing, and then taking a look at Berthoud in particular and what can we do to solve some of these issues.
August 22nd is our first one.
That's our first main kickoff. We had a kickoff with staff. And we're providing them information. Tom got some housing report that the county did a few years ago. Loveland Housing Authority provided us with a housing study that they have access to. So heirs doesn't have to recreate all of this primary data. And something that actually came up in the short-term rental meeting that happened on Tuesday night with the Town Board of Trustees, utilizing ADUs as short-term rentals versus housing options. So staff isn't going to have time to research that before we go back to the trustees, but that is something that we can ask the heirs to help us all talk about. What does that do to housing affordability? And then we can talk about some of those other issues that have kind of stemmed from that discussion. But yes, so the report card, that's one of the first things that staff do when they, come to work at a community is, where's your comp plan? Where's your action plan? What's happening, what's going on, and what needs to happen. And also, the nice thing about a comprehensive plan is it affords the opportunity to pivot. If something is no longer important, we can pivot and just publicly admit, this just isn't going to work for the town anymore. We're going to do this instead. And it's okay. But again, it represented what the goals and needs and desires were from 2019 to 2020 when you all were developing that plan. Okay, now I think we're done. Do you have
Thank you.
Does anybody have
questions
questions about any of this?
So on this, you had 2025 on a lot of the statuses. Are those, and again, I think you addressed the different colors of that thing.
Mhm.
But for the things that are identified as 2025, is that stuff all budgeted for?
Not yet. And so that's also a way, it's like, okay, these things look really good and we really want to try to start thinking about, can we do them in 2025? But not everything are going to get done in 2025. And sometimes, like the wayfinding sign and branding, some of those items, there might be 3 or 4 goals, and they can potentially be lumped together and still accomplish the intent of that action plan item. And maybe it's just taking bits and pieces from them. But yes, I mean, there were a lot on 2024, and no, we didn't get them all done. So they got pushed off to 25 along with everything else that we thought would be 25. So it's just a way to say, gosh, it'd be awesome to do all of this, but not everything's going to get done.
Comments or-
Well, no,
We
it's
tried.
prioritization.
Yeah.
Any other comments, observations? Great, thanks, Ann.
And then, Commissioner Donnelly, I did want to follow up with you. A couple months ago, you asked, how can Planning Commission influence CDOT when it comes to 287? And I've talked with a lot of people. I've talked to Administrator Kirk. I've talked to other planners, talked to our engineering team. There isn't a lot that this board as planning commission can do to influence. But what we can do is when we have land use applications that include frontage or have transportation impact studies, things like that, we can review that, but there isn't a lot that we can do to influence speed, safety. That's unfortunately out of our purview. So, but I did a lot of research and a lot of phone calls to figure out how can we do that. I mean, we all can call CDOT repeatedly and say, you've got to do something. Especially, do you all come from the west ever? And that new sign that they've put up, even when you drive 20, it says you're speeding, slow down.
From what?
That's a CDOT. It's by Hayes Market. It's on the south side of Mountain
Oh, yeah,
Avenue.
okay.
Yeah, so that's a CDOT thing.
Everyone's-
Even when you're going 20, it says you're speeding.
We have them in our subdivision. I think they put them there for the golf tournament. And anyway, not only do they tell you you're speeding, but at night they're blue and red, so it looks like there's a police car. It's
I love
crazy.
it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
And Todd, again, do you want to just give them an overview of how Tuesday night went?
Please.
Yeah.
I read the Bertha surveyor about it,
Yeah,
but it
that's all
didn't
I
seem to
read,
tell you
too.
very much.
Yeah, exactly. I think it went relatively well. We bulked up our presentation quite a bit, so Anne did an introduction and kind of laying out how code amendments go, so I think that was really helpful. And then I went into the pretty standard presentation, much of what you all have already seen, and then addressing what your recommendations were, so we had some additional slides there. There was a handful of individuals from the community and typical individuals that we've heard from before. But otherwise, it was I think a really good conversation. Lots of open dialogue between myself and the board of trustees. Lots of questions, but I think overall, I think that they really understood. I think Anne's slides were really helpful in their understanding of how code amendments work and how we're moving forward and grasping that these are laying the foundation, and we can certainly always come back should we have any issues or start to see things arise if these are approved and we start to implement. They did ask, I think in total, there's 3 topics for us to look at before the next hearing. So the next hearing will be on August 13th, and that is the final. That is the actual public hearing where they will make a decision. This one was just an introduction.
So they operate like on first reading and second reading, kind of like the legislature does.
This was 3 hours and 19 minutes.
Oh my.
First reading.
I'm sorry, what was this about?
Short-term rental regulations.
Oh, the short-term rentals, okay, thank you.
We had asked them to look at 2 things. One was the density and also enforcement. And what were the discussions about that? In other words, what was the next, what were they, how did they conclude those?
So with the enforcement, we did do some additional research. Our neighborhood services officer and then Erin and myself, we did look into the development code to get a bit more clarification on enforcement. So section 5 of the development code is actually specific to enforcement of those items contained within the development code, which would be inclusive of short-term rental regulations. So we felt that there was truly not a need to add additional regulations to the short-term rental regulations since they're already covered in section 5. We did provide some
Specific
clarification.
no-goes, like we talked about. In other words, where you'd say, if you, if someone is renting and, I'm trying to remember what the example was we used that night, and they buy, or the person was renting their home in a short-term rental, and they didn't put safety measures in. So that would be an automatic suspension for a certain period of time, or
So it's structured on how our enforcement is already practiced. So the structured system is already in place, and so it would be complaint driven. So if they received a complaint, then code enforcement would investigate, and then there is a process already established in place that they would essentially it's notice 30 days to remedy. And the way code enforcement currently does it is it's 3 letters. So the first letter tells you, of course, what you're in violation of, and then it gives you 10 days to remedy the violation. If that goes left unchecked or unacknowledged, you get a second letter telling you once again what the violation is, that you have 10 additional days, and then you have a third and final letter. And after the third and final letter, if you don't remedy within 10 days, once again, and then there's a summons and you go to court. Our neighborhood services officers don't have the ability to write fines or tickets, so that is the and then that would be the remedy, and the judge would determine path forward. However, we would be keeping track of, the intention is to keep track of those violations, because one of the regulations within the short-term rental, what has been proposed, is that we certainly would not renew the license if there's outstanding or substantial continuous violation. If we were to, I believe, and correct me here, and the structuring of code enforcement, if that was something, I think that's a bigger picture item, and if it needs to be evaluated and possibly how they approach code enforcement, that would be a separate discussion.
And I'm just worried about, you've got this period of time, where you're sending these letters, but they can still rent us out. They've got safety violations, and we're still letting them rent it out. That would be my concern.
Yeah, I think, but because there is that structured system we have to follow, we couldn't immediately revoke it. I mean, they have to investigate, they have to validate the concern of the complaint. We couldn't just go off of.
But there will be life safety inspections before they even get a permit by fire and or our building official.
So they take all of the fire, I don't want to belabor the point, but if they take all the fire extinguishers out in the house, then you can keep renting. Your license doesn't get suspended, even though someone's gone in and inspected that.
And I think that goes back to that we expect property owners to be accountable, and that they are taking liability, and it is risk running a short-term rental, and that those expectations of safety. Again, if something were to happen to their guests, that would be solely on their shoulders, and that is too why we require evidence of liability insurance for the short-term rental. But yes, that's one of those unique challenges to short-term rentals, of course. And then with the separation requirement, we had the separation or buffer requirement. That is something we had talked about in work sessions prior. So I did have a lot of research on that, so I just reintroduced the topic and went with 500 foot setback, which is seen in quite a few communities. So we did have an extensive conversation about that and how to apply it, and the potential of doing, attached and detached single family homes. There was a lot of good conversation around that. They weren't set on the 500, and so I will be coming back with examples. So they asked for 200, 400, and 600 feet. I'm going to also do 800 and 1,000. And our GIS staff member is he is in the process of producing our interactive map, which we were working on anyhow, but we should have that done by August 13th, so I can use the actual map. And I will have, I think we landed on 5 different properties throughout the community, and they will show, and I will highlight and turn on all those buffers so that we can get a scaled view and then zoom in to see how that impacts each of the neighborhoods. And so we'll be looking at it more from different lot size types. So I think that will give them perspective. I think generally the idea is that as of right now, which obviously could change, is that they want to apply the setback equally across the community. As there are challenges to do it by zone district per se, or because not all, one R1 zone district, there are minimum lot sizes, but you can have, of course, a variety of lot sizes. So it's hard to, tie it to anything specific. We also discussed by doing, say, like the downtown area, but defining boundaries for separation would be arbitrary. So that creates its own challenges as well. So it'll be an interesting conversation to see where it goes when I have all those additional examples.
It'll be interesting to see, yeah. I think our word was, and I think we all talked about having 5 of them on the same street, close to each other. I can see where that's an issue, could become an issue.
So I had examples for 250 feet and 500, which I think was really helpful just in that case. But so I'll give them a little bit more to give them an idea.
Can I ask you a question? So if you have a short-term rental and chaos, just to update me on this, chaos ensues for a weekend, then they would theoretically get a letter and that chaos would have to be resolved within 10 days. These people have gone on to wherever they're going. What exactly gets resolved?
And again, that is the challenge of short-term rentals, is that there's that constant turnover. So you may have one problem, yes, on a Saturday, and by the time staff comes in and gets any kind of complaint, it's Monday and they're on their way. However, they are required to have a property manager who is available 24 hours a day to respond. So if an adjacent property owner, I guess to back up, one of the requirements upon approval of a short-term rental business license is that the property owner will be required to send out neighborhood notification to adjacent properties within 500 feet.
Okay.
We will provide the template letter for that. They have to provide us a copy of that letter as well. So hopefully that then everybody in the community or close nearby will have the contact information on hand. Our interactive map that we are creating will also contain property manager information, so you can access it online. And we will encourage on our short-term rental webpage that prior to making complaints to the town, that they do reach out to property management for an immediate response.
Okay.
And hopefully property managers will be good about that, as they are required by the code to do so. If it goes unresolved or it continues, of course, or in any instance, they can contact property manager and report a concern to the town. And then, yes, our neighborhood services officers will still investigate, and they will certainly keep track of those complaints as they come in, because again, if we're seeing the same property getting the same complaints over and over again, then it'd be indication that the property management isn't necessarily doing their job, or they're, as property owners, potentially not communicating with their guests of the rules. So hopefully through all of that, we'll see good players. Of course, there's always those one-offs, and we understand that. And again, that is the challenge of short-term rental.
And 2 other
Thank you.
things.
Yeah,
If there's a noise complaint or something, you also call the police.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that is the
How about
municipal.
the deposits that we suggested? So if you want to rent a short-term rental, you have to give a deposit of 2,000, something like that. And if there was a problem, that deposit is kept by the property owner for a fee that goes to the town. So we link the accountability to some amount of money for the people.
I have no idea how we would do that.
Say again?
That would be typical.
Yeah, I don't know how we would do that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that would be enforced.
there'd have to. I think the concern there is that someone is forfeiting money on the basis of a complaint that
Yeah,
didn't
but-
get tried to some hearing officer. So you've got some constitutional issues there, I think.
Well, I understand that, but the people renting for, I don't know, they come an ex team of football players and they want to meet all together for the weekend. They make a big mess and then they go away. And then they have no accountability on that. And the poor property owner may have a basketball team the next weekend and have another complaint, and then it's always on the shoulder of the owner, not on the people that are renting it. So
And then the other thing, that we just made that Ton made very clear in the meeting is that if you're in a homeowners association and that homeowners association's guidelines, covenants, whatever, or metro district prohibits a short-term rental, you cannot still come to the town and get a permit for a short-term rental.
yeah.
How will you know though?
As part of the Smithville requirements, you're required to provide a letter from the HOA or Metro District.
So if the Metro District does not allow short-term rentals, this process that you're going through now is not going to supersede that. It's just meant to kind of legalize what's going on where it's allowed.
Yes, so currently they're not allowed. So we've had a lot of individuals operating outside of that. So they've been violating and have gotten summons. But yes, so this would make it legal, and then HOAs or metro districts could then provide regulations that are more restrictive than the town's regulations. They could not do less restrictive, but more restrictive. So yes, they
So
can say.
if the Metro District does not allow them, then game over.
Yeah, because they will not receive the permit from the town.
Okay.
And the town would not enforce those covenants. It is the
Right, it's the
responsibility.
Metro District or HOA.
So if right now, if there are operators of a short-term rental in a HOA or metro district that prohibits them, the town has provided summons to those that we know about, but if a HOA or metro district is also aware of others, they should also be pursuing their own form of remedy.
Right, so people that are living next door to this, that is not allowed in the neighborhood by HOA or Metro District, they should be complaining to their Metro District and HOA and not to the town, which didn't allow it in the first place.
Right.
Okay.
That's very astute.
And did they talk about the number of licenses? I know we talked about 50,
Yep.
so 50 is the number right now.
Yep, so we're still going with 50. Doesn't seem to be changing.
There wasn't a lot of discussion on that.
There wasn't, so I think they're still comfortable with that.
It'll be interesting to see if this passes, if a lot of the HOAs or metro districts float a motion to ban these, and then of course it has to be voted on to change covenants and that kind of thing. Throughout those communities, it'll be interesting to
But
see
if you
that
can
happens.
lobby 67% of your members to, one way or the other, to allow them or not allow them.
Yep.
And you're successful, then the democratic process worked within that HOA.
Exactly.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see if we start seeing that with these, with the annual meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, that is it. We're now at 7:35.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Erin.
Oh, no.
And
I always learn, I always learn something from these two terrific planners, so it's great.
Well, with that, any other questions anybody has or anything to report?
Nope, you will have a land use, you will most likely have a hearing on the 13th, no, on the 8th.
Okay.
And,
I will not be here.
you will not be here. Okay, is everybody else gonna be here?
What are the next dates?
August
8th and the 22nd. And then also on the 8th, there will be a land use hearing, and on the 22nd will be a work session and maybe another land use hearing. We also still have one position open on the planning commission. So if you know of anybody that's as equally as wonderful as you all are, please help us recruit.
So, you can tell us what might be the land use.
No, we're not.
Not yet, it's a surprise.
Because we don't know if it's gonna happen for sure.
And I'm not gonna be here on the 22nd. I think I sent that in an email, but I won't be here on August 22nd.
Okay,
And then in September is 12, correct? September 12.
I
Take a look now on the phone.
Calendar.
So you anticipate one land use thing on August 8th, correct?
Yep, the 12th of September and then the 26th of September.
Alright, so one land use hearing on August 8th, possibly one land use hearing and the DOLA project on affordable housing on August 22nd. Okay. Got it. Alright.
Thank you all so much for the
Yes,
information.
thank you.
Yeah.
This is really helpful. Anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And second to the
I
adjournment?
second.
Alright, everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Abstentions. We are adjourned. Good job.
Thank